6, 2021 at the United States Capitol as a dust-up. Defending a reply he made on Twitter to Norm Eisen of the Brookings Institution, Del Rio tweeted, "Would love to understand the whole story about why the summer of riots, looting, burning, and the destruction of personal property is never discussed, but this is." When he met with the media on Wednesday, Del Rio said he felt there were two standards being applied. He said he was just expressing his opinion. He then apologized Wednesday in a statement. On Friday, Commanders head coach Ron Rivera said in a statement that Del Rio's comments do not reflect the organization's views and are extremely hurtful to the District of Columbia area. As we saw last night in the hearings, what happened on the Capitol on January 6, 2021 was an act of domestic terrorism. A group of citizens attempted to overturn the results of a free and fair election, and as a result, lives were lost and the Capitol building was damaged. I want to make it clear that our organization will not tolerate any equivalency between those who demanded justice in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the actions of those on January 6 who sought to topple our government. Del Rio is expected to address the team on Tuesday, though multiple sources close to the players have said they don't think it will be an issue with his players. On Thursday, NAACP President Derek Johnson called for Del Rio to resign or to be terminated because of those comments. Marcus Spears joining this conversation with us. Stephen A., I'll start with you, though. You agree with the decision to fine Del Rio $100,000?
Well, I have no problem with him being fined. He deserved to be fined because, as we discussed last week, his comments were insensitive, flagrantly ignorant, ill-informed, and what have you. But do I think that he should resign? No, I do not think he should resign based off of these comments. Now, there are people who have reached out to me, Marcus, and that's why I really, really wanted you to go first about this, because I want to say this before I even elaborate further on my position. I've gotten numerous calls with people who took umbrage with my position, but it wasn't based off of Jack Del Rio's recent comments. It was based off his history from his time in Jacksonville and what he did to Shaq Harris and what he did to undercut Coach Bailey and others back then. They pointed out that, that he's had some issues and some insensitive things that he may have done in the past. I don't know about those things. And so because I don't know about those things, I can't speak intelligently about them. If there is a history with Jack Del Rio that involves him looking at issues pertaining to African Americans and really downplaying those things and minimizing and marginalizing issues that pertain to the African American community, that's a bigger problem. And I'm certainly not going to sit up here and try to defend him one bit. But as I said to Ryan Clark last week, specifically as it pertains to this issue, he was wrong to classify the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol last January 6th as a dust-up. It was an irresponsible statement to make. There were people that were upset who, let's call it what it is, who happened to be white. If there were black people in there, I didn't see them. I didn't see him at all. There were white folks that were pretty ticked off about the election results. And I'm not going to get caught up in the big lie or anything like that. All I'm going to say is that the election is the election. At the end of the day, you do what's in the best interest of the country. And when you've got people that are caught up in themselves and want what they want, like our former president, and he wants to sit up there and call it, and call it like, hey, I won and the election was rigged. Think about the damage that does to our nation. And it's just amazing to me that somebody would be so selfish to think purely about themselves and not about what's in the best interest of the country at that particular moment in time. But that's a different subject for another day. In the end, what it comes down to is this. Jack Del Rio is a white guy. I don't expect a white guy to think like me. I don't expect a white guy to have the same level of sensitivity that I may have. And you do have some white people, not most, not all, but some white people who think exactly like he thinks. And my problem with everybody coming at him the way that they've been coming at him in terms of calling for his resignation, he said, hey, this is how I feel. He said, we're all Americans. Let's sit down and have a discussion. He didn't duck run, and hide. I'm actually upset that he took down his Twitter account because now it really, really shows his weakness as far as I'm concerned. If you said it, stand on it, and you said you want to have a discussion about it, then let's have a discussion about it, because when you don't speak up, Marcus, then what happens is you get to feel what you feel. You sit in the dark, and you're in an influential position where you're making decisions about people or what have you, and we don't know where you stand. And we don't know how to deal with it and to combat that. So when we're encouraging people to be quiet and to shut the hell up and to hide and disguise their true emotions, we never get to resolve anything. And we continue going on, and the same problems creep up year after year after year because people were quiet and they hid what they really, really feel, and they didn't provoke and create dialogue. I appreciate the fact that although it came from an ignorant and insensitive place without question, I appreciate the fact that Del Rio basically challenged us all to have a discussion about it, because I think that enlightens us as a nation, and it ultimately makes us better. That's where I'm coming from with this, Marcus.
Stephen A., this is layered for me. One, I worked with Jack Del Rio when he was here at ESPN working for NFL Live. And those conversations could have been had if he felt that way. I never ventured down that lane. Every time I worked with him, it was cool. Like it was a relationship by necessity because we worked together. I wasn't going to visit Jack Del Rio. We wasn't doing anything together. We used to sit at the airport, wait on our flights. So I never got any indication. I think the vitriol and his statement, obviously being ignorant and calling what happened at the Capitol a dust up. But I think from an African-American perspective, Black people's perspective, the anger comes from whataboutism. Okay, that's really what it boils down to. It's almost like this idea that because one thing is bad, we don't acknowledge another thing being bad. I see this play out all throughout our country. When something happens with white supremacy and guns, people talk about, what about Chicago? We don't like the fact that people getting killed in Chicago either. There are people working on that daily. We speak about that as well. Whataboutism? Well, that was a little dust up at the Capitol, and the riots and the looting and the murders of people throughout the course of that summer of madness because of George Floyd, which one was a reactionary thing to people feeling like there was no other alternative. We don't condone that either. We don't condone rioting and looting and tearing people's businesses down. If you're a person with a heart and a conscience, I think that's where the frustration comes from me, Stephen A. I understand what you're saying because we live in the same element when it comes to what you just talked about. Let me know who you are so I know how to operate around you. That's basically what you're saying. And if you're open for a discussion or open for dialogue that may change your mind or change your heart about something, cool, we can get to that point. But what Jack Del Rio said, to me, deserves the type of angst that it has. It's because you're around people that affects. When you say that, when you have available people to have conversations of why that came out like it did and why the reaction is like it is. Mm-hmm. And then to call what happened at the Capitol a dust up. Stephen A., somebody died in that situation.
5 people, at least 5.
At least 5. At least 5 people. My son played baseball here where we live with a father. His son plays on the same team as my son did, with a father that was a Capitol Police that's still recovering from injuries from the quote unquote dust up at the Capitol. So first of all, for Jack Del Rio not to know the ignorance of his statement, but me, I think the crux of it and what made me so angry about that is, one, he has the opportunity to be around people and see how that affects, because we could play around it. But the issue this summer was about Black people feeling marginalized, Black people being disrespected and killed and murdered at the hands of people that's supposed to protect you. Number one. The second part is the Capitol and that, two different things. We can be mad about wrongdoing in situations, but also acknowledge that those situations are not the same. And Jack Del Rio tried to make a comparison to both of those things, which should have people angry, especially Black people in this country. Mm-hmm. Let me make this clear too, because Stephen A., this is what happens when we start talking about this. I detest rioting. I detest looting. I detest destroying people's businesses that they've worked hard for to build. That is wrong. Right. The people that do that should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. And so
Right.
should the dudes and the people that went in the Capitol during the insurrection on January 6th.
Right.
They should be also.
Well,
okay? But we have to acknowledge why certain things happen because context is important.
but there's something else that's more important to acknowledge, and I appreciate this conversation because we're on the same page. Okay, we understand. We talk about everything. We talk about the murders that's taking place in Chicago and St. Louis and other places. We talk about that. We, as black people, we lamented. We know that when we had all of these protests in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing, that about 25 people were killed, over $2 billion in damages.
Yes.
Was caused, and we lamented that too. So for folks that think that black folks don't bring that up, don't talk about it, don't lament it, they just show that they don't know who the hell black people are and they don't know how we think. And by the way, let me add to something that you're going to nod your head in affirmation with. Black people put black people in jail all the time. See, that's the point that white folks don't give us credit for. Black folks put black folks in jail all the time. Serve on juries. We'll convict somebody in a heartbeat, okay? And we don't give a damn. We don't give a damn that they look like us. Damn it, you a criminal, you a criminal. You acting up, you acting up. You got to go, you got to go. We are quick to bring that stuff up.
Yes,
so,
sir.
Again, we're not diametrically opposed to pointing that out. But here's where it gets interesting. And again, we're going to have this discussion right now and in days to come, Marcus Spears. Here's the thing. Jack Del Rio's comments were insensitive. They were wrong, as far as I'm concerned. And when you call the insurrection a dust-up, people were killed. They tried to overthrow our government. I mean, and listen, and we even bring up the fact that if it were black people instead of white folks out there, black folks might have got slaughtered. Black folks might have got slaughtered. And all the things that have happened to us in our nation's history. We never stormed the U.S. Capitol. We knew better than that, but obviously they felt otherwise, okay? But let's understand something here. Because he is not a black man, now we got to ask ourselves a question, which is why I say we're treading in dangerous territory. He wasn't there at the insurrection. I mean, when they tried to storm the Capitol. Jack Del Rio just expressed an opinion about what he thought that was compared to the rioters. So, ladies and gentlemen, do we believe this man should be fired because he misclassified what transpired at the U.S. Capitol? I say no, and here's the reason why.
I don't either.
If we say yes, because I know you don't, because if we say yes, that he should lose his job based off of that comment, you know how many black folks gonna lose their job down the line for saying something?
Yeah.
I mean, we just get ready. Just get ready. It's gonna be a whole bunch of black people with pink slips coming. Because if we're gonna sit up there and say that this man needs to lose his job because of that ill-advised, erroneous, insensitive comment, if we're gonna say he should lose his job off of that, like the NAACP is implying, where does that leave us? Because I've said this many times, and I'm going to say it one last time. When white folks catch a cold, black folks catch pneumonia. It's always worse for us. Be very, very careful about what you're wishing on others, because it could come back to bite you. And that's me once again saying, I ain't selling out. I'm looking out. Black folks, white folks catch a cold. Black folks catch pneumonia. It's always worse for us. Be very careful how we going to take this and exact this kind of punishment down to Jack Del Rio, because it's going to come back and bite a whole bunch of people that's going to say something that ain't necessarily in pocket. Let's be careful.
Yep. Grateful to have